going on, guys? This is going to be second video on the dually, and it's going to be a fun video. So a lot of this has already taken place because it's stuff that is just going to be boring to record and show you guys. So like I said in the first video, this truck is stock. It's never been tuned. It's never even had an exhaust on it. The intake is still factory, all that sort of stuff. So I used to drive one of these trucks back in high school. That was my truck, and so I bought an exhaust for it. It was a 5-inch, and when things changed around and I was not going to keep that truck, I took that exhaust back off of it and put the stock exhaust back on it. So I still have that exhaust. I spent some time polishing it. I'll put some time in, or some pictures in here of me going through that process and what it looked like at the time. And ever since I polished it, it's just been sitting because I knew I was eventually going to buy this truck, and so it's going on this truck. So earlier today, I took off the stock exhaust and put this one on. It's a pretty basic process. If you've put an exhaust on the vehicle, you probably know what it's like. It's just a pretty big exhaust. So the stock size on these trucks is 3-inch. I'm going up to 5-inch. It's an MBRP. It's a full stainless exhaust. So we're going to take a look back here and get under it and see what she looks like. But yeah, it's in. It sounds good. I've got a few clips of it starting, revving it a little bit. And as the video progresses, I'm sure you'll get more footage of that. Pretty hard to see anything from up here, but you get the idea about it being polished. You can kind of see it, but underneath she looks good. It's 409 stainless. It's not 304, so it's not like a high grade of stainless, but it is stainless and it doesn't rust a whole lot. When I polished it, I did have to take some rust off of it, but it was not a bad process. It was not like raw steel or aluminized. So there she is. Got her third leg hanging down. And this is a 6-inch tip, also MBRP, as you can see there. But it's pretty noticeable from a distance. I put the tip on there in such a way that it kind of sends it out further. You know, this is going to be a tow truck. She's going to be towing trailers around. You want the exhaust further over away from the trailer. I don't want to be blowing smoke. Moving on from that, the second thing I want to cover in this video is going to be converting the front end to a sport bumper. So I've got a number of sport front ends because they are a valuable commodity, but right here, I've got a paint matched front grille for it. I've got all the bracketry, and then I got lighting, or the light brackets and headlights over there. And then obviously the factory bumper is off of it. I've got the sport bumper next door. So I'll be putting on the sport grille, the sport bumper, and the new lights, which they're not new. I just sanded them and clear coated them when I did the bumper and everything. And all that'll be going back in. I have HID lights for these, which I have to change the pin out so that the HIDs turn on as the high beams, not low beams, and so I don't get flashed. That should be a pretty fun little process. I've never had one of these trucks with a sport front end. I think that with the sport front end, these trucks it totally changes just kind of the vibe around them. I think that they turn into, in my opinion, a pretty sporty looking truck considering their full size. You know, I don't think there's really ever been, with the exception of like maybe a 3rd gen Cummins, a truck that just looks as sporty as these, which maybe that's why they called it a sport package. Wow. It kind of looks like a pig right now with just its nose stuck up in the air, but man, those grills are bitchin'. I love the look of them so much. Kind of looks bad because it used to have like a bug deflector, and so it's rusted out underneath there a little bit, but it's just surface rust. It's not going to do anything. It color matched pretty well. Obviously this hasn't spent, what would it be, 22 years in the sun. One thing I've noticed is that everything, oh, I need to unlock it again. Everything on the sport bumper is different. None of the mounts are the same. None of the mounts are the same. None of the hood latch stuff is the same. It's all different. So if you're gonna do this, you can't just slap on a sport grill onto your old frame and whatnot. This one is tubular. It's shaped different. The curves are different. And then this, I think the sport grill hangs down lower because this piece is a little longer. So I think it is different as well. I don't think it is, I know it is, but this is the first piece I ever painted shooting 2-stage paint, and I think it turned out pretty good. I do all my own paint, and I was pretty happy with it. So now that this is on, I'm going to go put the lights in probably, and then start looking at what it's going to take to put the sport bumper on. I was getting ready to put the headlights in. I realized that I've got switchbacks for this thing. I forgot that I had them. I haven't put the resistors in yet, so they blink kind of fast. But they work. So I'm gonna get the resistors wired in and put the headlights in. If any of you guys were curious which exhaust it was, I don't know what any of these numbers mean, but that's what it is. Headlights are in. Turn the high beams on. Boom. Now they're blue. I love that. I noticed personally driving around with like a pure white LED, or especially with the HIDs, that they light up the road better. So like road signs and stuff, it's easier to see them. Something to do with having the blue in there. It's a pretty vibrant turn signal. Let's do the other side. There it is. Alright, I am going to go get my sport bumper and all the bracketry and start putting it together. So it's a couple weeks later, but I got time to work on this hunk of junk again. I got all my hardware. I got my tow hook brackets in place. I mocked up the bumper on the truck already to get it figured out where I wanted it side to side, so that I could mount those brackets to the metal piece that goes across the front. And then those are all going to fit nicely with this, since it was all bolted up together. That's all tightened. Obviously this stuff, those are tightened, but the mounting hardware here, obviously, well, it's not on it. So I'm working on putting on the braces on each side. I put on the little plastic pieces there along the top and on there, and I had to make another brace that goes along here that catches these holes and those holes down there, because when I bought this bumper, the guy who I bought it from apparently did not include it, and I didn't know to look for it. So I made another one, and I think it'll work. I gotta try it out yet. So I've got the bumper all put together. Both the side supports are on, the bottom piece is on. This is not the piece I made. I just used this as a template for the piece I made, which will be for another sport bumper that I have that is going to go on a future project that I do not currently own. So now that this is all done, in theory, all I should have to do is line these two mounts up in the frame and shove it home. There's no mounts from the side that go into the frame like on the factory bumpers, so this install should be pretty easy. I have the fog lights for the sport bumper, but this truck did not come with fog lights. So I'm gonna have to do a little looking and see if there is wiring for it. I wonder what that is. I don't know, we're gonna find out. It's not tight right now and nothing's lined up, but I think I should be able to raise it some to get this gap out of it when I tighten everything down. But damn, it's like I said earlier, I just love the look of these trucks with the sport front end. The rest of the paint looks terrible, but damn, these things look mean. I love these sport front ends so much. So I do have the fog lights, I just don't have the wiring harness. So I'll probably still put them in even though I don't have the wiring harness, and I might just hook them up to be ran off the power to the headlights, or I run a relay to them or something so that it doesn't draw more power than the wiring can handle. I'm not sure yet, but it's on. Tomorrow I'll line everything up, put the tow hooks on, then it'll be done. So as you can see, the truck is together. The front end is completely assembled. Got a good comparison between two fine looking second gens here. I just love these sport front ends. I know I sound like a broken record, but damn, they look good. I got the tow hooks in. I had to like make my own tap to chase the threads from where I powder coated inside them. I just didn't really think about that when I did that. And I got the fog lights in it. So I'm not gonna hook those up. This truck doesn't have the wiring for it. I thought about wiring them in line with the high beams, so when the high beams turn on, they turn on, but the amount of times that I really would use fog lights independently would be so low, and it would just be for looks wiring them in with the high beams, so forget it. And then this truck is not going to have a front license plate because those are gay, and I'm not gay. So, man, it looks good. I cannot wait to get the back of this thing lowered, which I don't think that's something I've talked about, and it's probably not going to be in this video, but I have 2-inch drop shackles to lower the rear. So the shackle from the frame is underneath the leaf, so it lengthens that distance, which then brings the frame down. So that'll go from a 9-inch gap in the rear to a 7-inch gap, and then it has a 4.5-inch gap in the front. So it'll still retain some of the rake that it has now, but it'll be reduced a good amount. And that's fine, because when I'm towing, I don't want this thing to be squatting, because that would make me gay, and I don't want to be gay. So having somewhat of a rake with the rear end up, I'm okay with, because when I tow, then it's probably going to level out. So, man, I'm thrilled. So as you guys just saw, I just drilled and tapped the exhaust manifold for my EGT probe. So this is going to be the start of the third thing in this video that I'm going to show you guys, and that is going to be putting a Quadzilla tuner on the truck. So I've had this thing for quite a while. I've got it set up with their Bluetooth module to connect to my phone, and I just was having my dad's assistance drilling and tapping this stuff, since he is very meticulous and I appreciate his help. So that all went well. I'm not sure what I'm going to move on to next. I'll probably have a little peek at the instructions. So we're going to have a little story time, because a lot has happened since you saw me drill and tap the exhaust manifold. So the chip is all hooked up right now. I just installed that off camera because it was just, I really wanted to focus on this with the pump tap and everything. I didn't want to be bothered recording, because, you know, I don't want to screw this up. So the power was ran, it's being pulled out of inside. I still have to clean all the wiring up, but I will do that when I do the audio system in this, which will be soon. I'm recording it kind of in parallel with this video, but the wiring for the power is done. Obviously the EGT is done. I bought a BD diesel stealth plate to go on top of the VP44. I installed that. that all went more or less smoothly. I had some hiccups with that, but it is installed and we're getting good voltage through that. The map sensor right there, that guy's installed. That T, you can't really see it, and then to the can down there, that is connected as well. And then I've got the one temperature sensor they send you, I've got that ran to the transmission. And I did end up putting in the fuel pressure sensor as well. So the story time starts with when we were installing it. So it was getting really late. Like I said, we had some stuff that kind of was being a little bit problematic. And when I took it for a drive, I turned it up to level 5, which I would have expected a puff of smoke at least taken off. I wasn't like hammering it, because this truck is still relatively fresh from coming out of storage. I'm still looking over things. And so it didn't smoke at all, which I thought was kind of interesting. So another thing I noticed was that it didn't read boost in. So the map sensor was not reading in correctly. So the next day I came out and I disconnected the Quadzilla. I disconnected the Y to the Quadzilla, plugged the factory harness back into the map sensor, hooked up my scanner to it, which reads live data. I did a little brake boost and it started reading boost. So that tells me the map sensor is fine. So when we put in the T for the map sensor that goes to the Quadzilla, the connectors did not fit very well. So what I've ended up doing is I had to pull out one of the locks for the pins inside the connector to the harness that goes to the factory connector on the harness side, if that makes sense. So it doesn't have the lock for the pins in it, but as long as they don't push out when you put the connector together, in my opinion, it's fine because everything makes contact. I took it for a drive afterwards and boost started reading in. And why that is relevant to the smoke is because from what I've read, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've read, if the Quadzilla does not see boost, it will not add fuel. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense why it didn't smoke. Which, I'm not a huge rolling coal addict or something. I think a light haze is perfectly acceptable and I don't really want any more than that. But I wanted to see it smoke just to verify that the wiretap was working. And when I didn't see that, I was like, oh boy, did I screw it up. So anyways, I didn't even get to test it because I was like, all right, got that sensor working, let's keep it on a roll. And that was when I wired in the fuel pressure sensor and plumbed that in, got it working so when I primed it didn't leak, and it only built up to 8 psi with the truck off. I'm like, okay, that's low. We have Dad has another truck that it's tuned and it usually sits at like 12 psi, which is normal for these trucks. You want them to be above, I don't know, you want them to be in like the 12 to 14 range. So that truck's got a healthy lift pump, which this truck does not have the lift pump that's on the block. It has been retrofitted to the one in the tank. And this VP has also been rebuilt or remanned or replaced, I don't know which. It just has a sticker on it that says replaced, I think. And so my theory is that the lift pump has already gone out in this truck and it took out the VP. So they both are in replaced, and that's why it has the in-tank pump. And so I saw the 8 psi and I was like, well, that's not great. So I started it and it dropped to 7. I'm like, okay, that's really not great. And no load, just in park, free revving it, it dropped to 5 psi. And I was like, that's really not good. So this truck has 140,000 miles. When my dad bought it, we didn't really put any mileage on it. We pretty much drove it home from Arizona. I think we did one trip towing with it, and it's pretty much sat since then. We've just driven it occasionally, nothing of any significance. And so the fuel filter on it's never been changed. And it could be totally possible that the fuel filter is what's causing that it could be causing a pressure differential. The pump could be making fine pressure, but it's just being reduced by the filter. So I thought about it and I thought, I don't really care. I've got a Fass pump for this. It's going in, because the second thing that could be causing the low pressure is that it was like on, or maybe at the time it was below empty. So there was like very little fuel in it and it could have just simply been sucking dry. But regardless, I thought about it. I'm like, with the pump being possibly weak, with the factory fuel filter being possibly plugged, and with it being empty. You know, I've got the pump. It was one of the things I wanted to do, so it's going to get put in this video. So I started just ripping into that. My mom and I went on a little vacation, so I had to take some time, and that's why these clips are a little later. But so before I left though, I took the tank out. All the lines are disconnected, and right now I'm just prepping to start working on installing the Fass. So the chip is all in. Like I said, I have to redo the wiring because it's not clean and pretty, but that will get done when I do my audio system, and it'll all look pristine like the Jetta's wiring did. So that'll get cleaned up. The chip is done, exhaust is done, the sport front end is done. So now I'm going to get into installing the Fass. So with the tank being out, this was really easy to pull out of the tank. With this being a retrofit truck, I'm not sure if this is the same hanger as trucks with the pump on the side of the block like they are normally. And there's a few things I didn't really know what to think of. So obviously the return is here. This is off the return from the engine slash VP44. This is the supply to the VP44. This was just capped off, and then it had a hose running down into here. So I'm not sure if that used to be a return at some point, maybe a return from the pump, so that it didn't, you know, overpressure the VP44. And I'm pretty sure this is a breather, so I can breathe in and out of it, and it's got like a weird diaphragm looking thing on the bottom, so I don't know what's going on there. But all I had to do to make this work with my Fass is all this webbing used to come around here. You can kind of see the remnants of it there, but you had to grind that down, or I ground it down most of the way, and then I sanded it all flat. So you just have to be really meticulous about that, not to have any waves in it, because otherwise these little rubber gaskets probably won't want to seat. And then I just cut the top off of the old fuel outlet here, and I just ran a hole saw down, and I just ran a hole saw down the top of that nipple that used to be here that was blocked off. So these are both in permanently. The return off the head and VP44 is going to come in here. That's done. I got the suction side done, so that when it's all compressed, it has about a 1/4 inch of room, and I have a notch in the bottom, so if for some reason this does get compressed further, if the bottom of the tank gets hit up, which I don't ever foresee that happening, but I have a notch in the side of the tube so that it will always be able to suck fuel in, and then this will be the return from the Fass. So I still have to make that, but this is pretty much done. So this is going to be attached to the factory line, and I think what I'm going to do is have this kind of follow next to it, and then this loop around further yet, and then this I think is the breather. So I'm just going to take a hose and run it down next to the pump and just have it vent to the atmosphere. I just don't like it being open where water can get up into it. I want it a hose going down so it's harder to get water up into the tank. So I think I'm just going to have all these loop around the sides, so it should all kind of just cascade and look kind of cool, keep it nice and tidy. But this is pretty much done. I got that return piece cut to length. I got everything zip tied together, made sure everything's tight. Got it back in the tank. I don't know if it was necessary, but I also depinned the power lines to the old fuel pump out of the connector. That way there's just one less thing in the tank to wobble around and hit stuff or fall off or whatever. So now that this is done, I'm gonna get the tank put back in the truck and start running some lines. Well, I got my lines attached, vent line, supply, and return. Obviously the tank's under it, and then you can kind of see it right there. That is my return off the VP44 slash back of the head. And then up here I've got my fuel delivery or supply to the VP44, the old fuel pump mount, which it had a block off plate, the fuel filter, all that's gone. So I've got to pull out the rest of the factory fuel line right there, and then I'm ready to mount the tank. The tank is in, it's It's all bolted up for good. I got the drive shaft back in, tightened down. I had to just lower it to get that strap out right there. I got everything nicely ran. I still have to do some wiring and obviously cut the fuel lines to size, but so far it's all going well. I'm putting this kit together and they give you a 1/4 inch thick gasket to put between this mounting plate and, oh, where is it at? Oh, it's back here. The bed bolt, because that's where you mount this kit at. Well, this bolt does not have an extra amount of thread in it to have another 1/4 inch taken out of it. Well, 1/2 inch including the gasket. So what I did is I just put cork on it that I use on my speakers, and I'm going to use that as a spacer and vibration dampener instead of the rubber. But other than that, I've been really happy with how everything's going so far. I like their kit. I feel a lot better with this cork in here instead of that rubber gasket. With the rubber gasket, even with it tightened down, you could still move it. And now it doesn't move at all. And it tightened down a lot more. There was about a 1/4 inch worth of engagement before it started tightening down. So I'm pretty confident that this bolt has good threads. So now I'm gonna probably take a look at the instructions, but I have a feeling it's gonna have us mounting our pump, which is this guy. So I got the inlet to the pump, to the engine fitting, and I got this mounted. So now I think this goes on the truck. I don't know why, but I like working at night. It's very peaceful. So as typical as it seems like every project goes this way that I've posted, really, it's another late night. So I had to take a break from earlier, went to a tractor pull. That was fun. So now we're back to this. So as you can see, I've got the plumbing all down through there. I haven't tidied any of the wiring up. That feed line to the engine is not plumbed in, or not like secured or zip tied yet. It's just kind of hanging loose for now, but this is how I've got everything set up. The filters are on, wiring is still just hanging. I got my feed and return to tank all wired up. There's my breather, and I just bumped the key twice to try to prime the system. I'll do it again so you guys can hear it. That kicks on the pump, which you can hear. That sounds good. It picks up its prime really quickly. I filled both the filters and I think that helped. I don't know if you can hear it. Well, you're not gonna now since the pump shut off, but you can hear fuel going through the VP44. So that tells me that I've got fuel everywhere in the system. I think it's pretty well primed, and in theory, I think it's ready to start. But what I'm gonna do now is, because the Quadzilla does not give you a very long harness for the fuel pressure sensor, I'm going to cut this wire, this little red and yellow dude, and splice some extra wire into him so that I can run my gauge back here on the Fass, which is something that I would like to do because I've read that the VP44s can kind of jackhammer the gauge and break it or just not read it in correctly. So, which that could be another thing that was causing me to get a bad reading. But if you can see right there, that port is where my pressure sensor is going to go. And he is just chilling right here. So this guy's going to get put in there. I'm going to extend those wires, and we'll be able to read what the fuel pressure is. You guys can see kind of there. I got the fuel pressure gauge hooked up. I had to extend the harness like I said. I've got it running right there parallel with my main wiring harness for the Fass. I got everything tidied up. All the hoses are zip tied in place. There's the gauge. I'm pretty happy with it. Looks good. The only thing I have to clean up is the wiring harness back here, but that's going to be something for tomorrow. So now that the gauge is plugged in, I'm going to cycle the key again, turn the pump on, and I got to get on my phone, so I got to stop recording, but I'm going to look at the Quadzilla and see if it's reading in. When I've been driving the dually, I've had a problem where it squeaks. Something terrible. And we've had this happen before, I'm sure you guys have too, where a rock will get into your disc brake and it'll start just squealing like crazy. Well, I found my culprit. Squeak's gone. The brakes are in good shape otherwise. They've got plenty of pad. Can't really see that side. Plenty of pad though. They're not warped. They're all cleaning up pretty well, at least where they make contact. Another thing I thought was cool was that the lug nuts have the torque stamped onto them, so these go to 140 foot-pounds. Another thing is that on the dualies, since these are not a conical, they're flat, they are hub-centric, and then the studs line them up, and then the lug is just solely to torque them onto the hub, whereas like the Jetta, you have the stud, which then they're still hub-centric, but the stud centers it to the hole because they're conical, and then on the Toyota, the lug nut does all the centering because they are not hub-centric. So that's kind of cool, just seeing another way of doing it. I've seen this before on other dualies that I've worked on, but now that I have my own, I like it. So after I had taken off the stock fuel filter pump bracket, I noticed that when I started it the next time there was a lot of blow-by. And then, ignore that, running it today, I noticed that there was a big pile of blow-by. So I'm like, alright, I'll empty the container for the blow-by, the catch can at the front of the truck. And as you guys saw, it was filthy. I just cleaned it. But I also realized that when you take off that fuel pump bracket for the stock pump, albeit this one didn't have a pump there anyways, that bracket right there, that is the hole on a 12 block, on a 12 valve block. That is the hole into the cam for the mechanical pump. Well, this doesn't have one. This has an electric pump since it's a 24 valve, but the hole is still there. So when I took this bracket off, there was just a hole there into the block, and the only thing stopping oil from coming out was the gasket. So I saw all that oil and was like, whoa, wait a minute, I think that's my problem. So I put the plate back on and that should be solved. I'm going to put the catch can back on the front and go take it for another drive. With the catch can all put back together, I'm going to try something different. I've got a catch can, but I don't want to hook it up today because I don't have the parts to do it. So in the meantime, I just stuffed this thing full of steel wool. I figured if this gets oil in it like it's supposed to catch and this thing starts jostling around, hopefully that steel wool will stop the oil from just splashing out of these holes, and maybe this will make it a better design. I'll just have to see how it goes. unfortunately I don't have too many driving clips, just because I've got a lot of stuff going on with the truck right now. I'm rapidly making progress, and I want to cut this video off so it doesn't get too long, but you guys should still get an idea of what it sounds like. So far I'm really happy with everything. The exhaust, the tuning, fuel pump, all that looks really good and sounds really good. So as far as the tuning goes, I've worked on making a tune for this thing with still stock injectors and stock turbo, and I've got a pretty good tune set up for it. So I'd like to get into the tuning more, but I want to make it into a separate video because I could probably ramble on for quite a while about that. So I'd rather keep that to a separate video. But as far as everything in this video is concerned, really happy with it. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff going on with this truck. A lot of it's already been done at the time that I'm recording this, but you guys will have to wait to see it. So if you get to this point, I appreciate you guys watching. Have a great day.